Lingwati and Tabiso Lihuku. Coming up this hour, it's December the 1st. That means it's World AIDS Day.
In South Africa, we're living with about 8 million people who are living with HIV.
And South Africa reflects on the hosting of the G20 summit.
For generations, Miami has been a haven for those fleeing communist tyranny in South Africa.
But first, the news with Jalani, followed by sports news headlines with Figile.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Nhlanhla. Good day. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has accused the Democratic Republic of Congo of delaying the signing of the US-brokered peace deal aimed at ending the M23 conflict in the eastern DRC. The DRC's Minister of Communication has, however, rejected the accusation and put blame on Rwanda, whom he accuses of refusing to withdraw its troops from Congolese territory. The DRC president is this week expected to travel to the United States to sign a final peace agreement with his Rwandan counterpart in the DRC. Chris Ochamringa reports.
Recently, President Felix Tshisekedi traveled to Serbia and he met the Congolese community living there, and he told them there will be no integration of M23 soldiers in the army, what they call in French mixage and brassage, because they're saying in the past that is something that they have tried and it has failed to work, because they're saying some of these ethnic Tutsis from Congo have always been kind of spying for the Rwandan government. And so just before even this deal has been signed, we're seeing some cracks and potential trouble ahead.
South Africa's Police Minister Senzo Mchunu is set to appear before the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry in Pretoria tomorrow. The commission is probing the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mahlangu's allegations that senior police officials, including Mchunu, are corrupt, have links to criminal syndicates and interfere in policing operations. Mchunu, who is on leave of absence, has dismissed the allegations as baseless. Mchunu's alleged associate, is accused of facilitating the minister's payments from Vusumuzi Kat Matlala, a criminal suspect known for his involvement in large state contracts. Kani Mapanga reports.
We now have confirmation that the current police minister that is on a leave of absence, Minister Senzo Mchunu, will be appearing from tomorrow before the stand. I'm sure his testimony will take more than one day, but of course he is at the center of this critical probe because his disbandment decision, rather if you put it that way, is at the center of what triggered that July announcement by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi to reveal all of these allegations of criminality, political interference and corruption in the criminal justice system, which brings us to this all-important probe.
Still in South Africa, lobby group AfriForum has denied allegations that it is spreading disinformation that government is committing genocide against Afrikaners in South Africa. This after President Cyril Ramaphosa condemned what he called a disinformation campaign that was impacting South Africa's relations with the US. Ramaphosa said that the false information that some groups and individuals were spreading had influenced the US's administration's stance on South Africa. Critics have accused AfriForum of spreading disinformation in the US following its trip to the White House in February this year. AfriForum's CEO, Kali Kriel.
AfriForum never spread any misinformation. The real misinformation that is being spread are by those that are trying to deny the real threat that the Expropriation Act has for the economy of the country. The President signed the Expropriation Act on the 23rd of January, and President Trump responded 10 days later. AfriForum played no role in that.
South Africa's National Health Department says 1.1 million out of the 8 million people living with HIV/AIDS in South Africa are not on treatment. The department statement comes as the country joins the international community in marking World AIDS Day. Deputy President Paul Mashatile will lead the national commemoration of the day at the Hamasemola Stadium in the Limpopo province. The country has recorded 173,000 new HIV infections in the past year. The department spokesperson Foster Mohale says a lack of adherence to treatment is derailing government's efforts to eradicate HIV in the country.
The country has made remarkable strides in combating HIV and we continue to carry the highest burden of HIV globally, with an estimated 8 million people living with HIV, and about 6 million of them are on life-saving treatment. Over 3.5 million people living with HIV in South Africa are virally suppressed, meaning their risk of transmitting HIV to a sexual partner is almost zero.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is due to meet his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron in Paris today. This as diplomatic efforts to end the war between Ukraine and Russia intensify. Yesterday, a meeting with US and Ukrainian officials in Florida ended with both sides describing negotiations as productive. US President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to travel to Moscow today with the latest draft of the American brokered peace plan. The BBC's Sean Dilley has the details.
The president said he wanted to stop people being killed and he believed Russia wanted to see it ended too. He told reporters, "I think there's a good chance we can make a deal." Earlier, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio described the talks as delicate and complicated, but he insisted officials were optimistic. Mr. Rubio said the US and Ukrainian negotiators both believe a solution is needed, not just to end the war, but to ensure that Ukraine prospers.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo-Mwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Now, sports headline. CAF Champions League group stage delivered strong performances from North African giants. And Gerda Steyn says she's proud of her brave performance in Soweto. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za.
We're broadcasting live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg, South Africa. We're on the DSTV audio bouquet, channel 802, on OpenView on channel 628, and you can live stream us on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app, available on the Google and Apple Play stores. The World Health Organization joins partners and communities to commemorate World AIDS Day 2025 today, under the theme Overcoming Disruption, Transforming the AIDS Response. The agency has called for sustainable political leadership, international cooperation, and human rights-centered approaches to end AIDS by 2030. In its annual report, the UNAIDS has said 2.5 million people have lost access to medicine to block the spread of HIV. Peter Ndoro spoke to Professor Lee Fairley from the Wits Reproductive Health and HIV Institute in South Africa.
Yeah, I think we still may not understand the full extent, and certainly, I mean, South Africa's HIV treatment program is really world class, and it really is very well established, and so I think that we had less impact probably than many of our neighbors. I think that certainly a number of other countries on the continent were extremely hard hit by the funding cuts. In South Africa, we're living with about 8 million people who are living with HIV, and about 150,000 South Africans acquire HIV on an annual basis. Well, those are the figures from 2023, and I think, as we know, adolescent girls and young women still continue to bear a disproportionate burden of new infections. Globally, we're looking at about 40.8 million people living with HIV, and about 1.3 million become infected on an annual basis. So certainly this is a tremendous improvement from our previous, well, say 10, 20, 30 decades ago. I mean, it is actually about a 54% decrease since 2010. But we're not quite there yet. Also, around 77% of people are accessing treatment who are living with HIV, But we know that in particular groups, so for example, like in children, we actually have much lower rates, so probably around about 65% of children who are living with HIV who are on antiretrovirals. So certainly there are still gaps and tremendous gaps that exist, and we still need to work extremely hard to try and close those gaps.
Have always been the most vulnerable of the groupings. Is that still the case?
Sorry, I didn't hear you the first.
Sorry, I was just saying that young females have traditionally been the most vulnerable. Is that still the case?
That is still the case. We have some very, very exciting new modalities, though, in terms of HIV prevention. So, the prevention campaign in South Africa is also extremely strong. There are probably about 2 million people who are accessing PrEP. And I'm sure you've probably heard of lenacapavir, which is really a sort of game changer in terms of HIV prevention. It's a 6-monthly injection, which is given subcutaneously, and essentially has shown an almost 100% prevention of HIV. And we know that is actually being rolled out in some demonstration projects quite soon, but by April, May next year will actually be quite widely available in the public space. And that is a very exciting modality in terms of getting us further in preventing HIV, especially in adolescent girls and young women.
Do we know how well we're doing in terms of these 95 targets? And just to help our listeners, 95% of all people living with HIV should know their status. 95% of those who know their status should be on antiretroviral treatment, and 95% of those on treatment should have a suppressed, undetectable viral load. How close are we to that?
So we still have work to do. So certainly in adult populations, we generally tend to do a little bit better, especially in terms of people who know their status being on antiretrovirals. But as the sort of cascade progresses, unfortunately, we see sort of steady fall off. And then there's particular groups that are not doing as well. So for example, children, by the time we actually get to viral suppression, those figures are really much lower than we would like them to be. Another group that is also needs specific attention is adolescents. And then, of course, some of the marginalized groups and actually groups who had substantial impacts of their funding, of the funding cuts. So transgender people, men who have sex with men, sex workers, those are really groups who've been particularly hard hit with the funding cuts. And there we really do need to work hard to make sure that people are retained in care and that they remain virally suppressed.
That was Professor Lee Furley from the Wits Reproductive Health and HIV Institute in South Africa on the line to Channel Africa's Peter Ndoro.
Day, we rise above disruption, transforming the AIDS response for every African community on Channel Africa.
African leaders are meeting in Algiers and they are demanding that colonial-era crimes be officially recognized, criminalized, and addressed through meaningful reparations. The gathering follows an African Union resolution earlier this year calling for a unified continental position on reparations and for colonialism to be formally defined as crimes against humanity. This comes as the African Union continues to mark its official theme of the year of reconciliation and reparations, addressing historical injustices. For more on this, we have Dr. Houston Chipula, historian, lecturer at the University of Zambia. Dr. Chiputa, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us on Africa Update. Dr. Chiputa, are you there? We seem to be having an issue with the line there. Dr. Chiputa, can you hear me? While we are trying to get hold of Dr. Chipula, we'll ask today's question as we mark World AIDS Day. The World Health Organization has called for sustained political leadership, international cooperation, and human rights-centered approaches to end AIDS by 2030. Now, do you think this is possible? You can share your thoughts on Channel Africa's social media platforms at Channel Africa 1 on X and Instagram, on Channel Africa on Facebook, or you can send us your comments and your voice notes to our WhatsApp number on +2763 406 9126. Let's try and see if we've got Dr. Chipula on the line. Good afternoon, Dr. Chipula. Are you there? We will get back to that story there. We're trying to get hold of Dr. Chipula, an African leaders meeting in Algiers, demanding that colonial-era crimes be officially recognized, criminalized, and addressed through meaningful reparations. Dr. Chipula, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you so much for taking your time and joining us on Africa Update. Just how significant and symbolic is this renewed push for African leaders to have colonial-era crimes formally recognized and criminalized on the global stage? Do you see this as a decisive turning point in Africa's long struggle for historical justice?
Well, it's actually long overdue. Because sometimes as an historian, I imagine if what was done to Africans by other races, particularly the Europeans and the Middle East people, was done to them by Africans, what would have happened? They would have long ago sought reparations and gotten them. Otherwise, they would have waged war on us. Because that's how unforgiving certain societies are. So when our leaders gather and say, can we take a step back into history and ask questions, uncomfortable as those questions may be, about how our ancestors were treated when colonial rule came to this part of the world, and then ask other uncomfortable questions and say, why don't you pay reparations? Why don't you do the following things? Because up to today, a lot of the artifacts that were taken from African societies have not been returned to Africa, including skulls of people taken from Namibia. You can imagine taking skulls of people, and after a Holocaust, the Namibian situation of the Herero people and the Nama people was literally a Holocaust by the German colonizers. So taking those skulls and putting them in museums and other places was not the best of things. The Algerian War of Independence, 1954 to 62, which almost caused the collapse of France, is another war where thousands of Africans lost their lives. You can go on naming them. The Mau Mau challenge in Kenya. A lot of people there lost their lives at the hands of British troops. And you can go on and on and on, counting African societies. And so when the leaders of Africa gather and say, can we have reparations? Can we declare colonial rule and its impact on Africans as having been crimes against humanity? As an historian, I feel comforted. I feel that perhaps justice is beginning to be recognized. How to be effected, it is something we must push hard for until eventually it is done.
Now, across the continent, we are witnessing more assertive and coordinated demands for justice and reparations. From your perspective as a historian, what does this growing momentum tell us about the political and cultural awakening occurring in Africa today?
Well, this is what you see now on social media. On TikTok, there's always different pictures of different Africans, but the statement is the same: make Africa great. Make Africa great again. So we are revisiting the greatness of Africa when African ancestors, African people, used to have very important empires and very important kingdoms. And so when people begin to have that nostalgia and want to use it to leverage and push an argument, push an agenda that, look, we want this. It means they are not just recognizing their own, here in Southern Africa, we say Ubuntu, our Africanness. They are not just recognizing that. They are also now beginning to cherish the African roots, the African culture. And we have seen in many places and in many occasions, African culture is now being pushed to the front. But also the unit of purpose that Africans have lacked for a very long time, though we still have a long way to go in having unit of purpose among African countries for various reasons, and because of the many different ways in which countries were colonized and the ways in which the former colonial intruders have kept hold on some of the countries, and they cause instability when some countries want to go their own way, and they cause problems. And we continue to see this in various parts of the continent. But yes, it is very significant that our people are reclaiming their cultures, our people are reclaiming their uniqueness, especially because African cultures are really very, very unique. But the momentum also to have a united voice, a united agenda, and a united push for all these things, I think it's a very good awakening among African peoples.
Many argue that Africa should not only pursue reparations but also systematic economic restructuring to address the long-term damage caused by colonial exploitation. What's your view on how African nations should balance calls for financial compensation with broader efforts to transform economic relationships with former colonial powers?
I think it's a clarion call. Look, when you look at the relationships between African countries and their former colonial powers, in fact, just African countries and the Western world, the external world, so to speak, the relationship is skewed in favor of those countries, the so-called developed countries. Because look at African commodities. You can talk of rubber, minerals, cocoa, coffee, bananas, talk about anything. The prices are determined abroad by the so-called international market forces. They are not determined by the sellers. But when we import finished products from the same products that we produce in Africa, again, those prices are determined by the same people. So you can't have it both ways, and that is why the push, not just reparations, but fair international trade practices, where Africans export and import goods and services the same way others do. Because, look, when you look at a country in Africa borrowing money from, say, the Paris Club, and a country in Asia borrowing money, but let me not even go to Asia, a country in Europe borrowing money, the two will be given the loans on two different terms. The African country will borrow on a higher interest rate compared to the European country, arguing that the risk for African countries is higher than the risk for European countries. And yet both are countries. So those unfair practices must now form part of the agenda. The World Trade Organization must be confronted head-on so that fair trading practices, because Africa's poverty is basically because of the unfair trading practices, not because Africans are corrupt, Africans are lazy, Africans don't know anything. No, it's the manner in which the world international economic system is arranged. It is tilted against the African people, regardless of how much you produce. For as long as, especially, that you produce raw materials, you still not make it economically. It doesn't matter how much you produce, you won't make it. And the worst is still, if these, say the minerals the mining companies are owned by Western countries or Chinese or Russian or whatever. Again, what we get out of the minerals as African countries is just a pittance compared to what they repatriate in terms of profits back to their countries, either through direct profits or through what you economists say insider trading, where they buy machinery and other equipment from sister companies, they inflate those, then they reclaim taxes back in Africa, so that at the end of the day, when we give them what in Zambia we call refunds, we end up remaining with very little money. And therefore, we now have to borrow from them. So we get very little in profits, then we borrow, and oftentimes we end up borrowing the same money that we gave them. So we need all those things changed if we have to have a leverage as African countries in terms of our development.
And lastly, Dr. Chiputha, before I let you go, from a historical and legal standpoint, what would it take for this struggle, the formal recognition of colonial crimes, restitution of stolen artifacts, and monetary reparations to be realized? What mechanisms or diplomatic strategies might be most effective?
I think they have to use various strategies, not just through talking. Once they achieve unit of purpose and especially industrialize and begin to use a lot of the raw materials locally, so that on the international scene you begin to see scarcity of these raw materials, then perhaps we can begin to walk tall and price them according to the way they are supposed to be priced, and not according to the buyers in the Western world or in the Eastern world. That way we can begin to leverage. And so the first, in my view, is to industrialize, begin to use most of these raw materials locally, and then export the finished products to whichever countries would need those to buy. Because when there is a scarcity of raw materials, obviously scarcity causes prices to go up. Then they'll be forced to buy at higher prices. Perhaps then we can begin to leverage and speak with a voice that will be heard. The way the oil-producing countries speak, when they decide to reduce oil production, prices go up and the world dances. Of course, I know for them, out of time, because we are going into electrification of literally everything, including motor vehicles. So for us who produce copper, for us who produce all these minerals that are needed now in the revolution that the artificial intelligence is pioneering, the producers will need to leverage on their products and be able to command the pricing of those products. But that can only be done if we produce most of these materials locally. Then we can have a voice. That's my view.
We'll leave it there, Dr. Chiputha. Thank you so much for taking your time and talking to us on Africa Update.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
That was Dr. Eustace Chiputha, historian, lecturer at the University of Zambia.
The sound of Africa is evolving. Experience our new mobile app. Free to download, free to connect.
We are broadcasting live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg, South Africa. We are on the DSTV Audiobook K, channel 802, on OpenView on channel 628, and you can live stream us on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app available on the Google and Apple Store. You can also join in the conversation by finding us on X at Channel Africa, numerical 1, Facebook at Channel Africa, Instagram at Channel Africa 1. You can also subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. Remember to use the hashtag Africa Update. I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu, standing in for Lulu Gaboo. It's time now for the latest news headline with Jwalani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Nhlanhla. Good afternoon. Making headlines, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has accused the Democratic Republic of Congo of delaying the signing of the US brokered peace deal aimed at ending the M23 conflict in the east of the country. South Africa's National Health Department says 1.1 million out of the 8 million people living with HIV/AIDS in South Africa are not on treatment. And finally, a court in Bangladesh has found that the British MP Tulip Siddig guilty of corruption charges. She was convicted of using her power and influence on her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh's former prime minister, to obtain a plot of land for her mother in the capital, Dhaka. I will have details on these and other stories at 1 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Jalani. It's over to Figile Lingwati with the latest sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Nhlanhla. We begin with football news. Match day 2 of the Total Energies CAF Champions League group stage delivered strong performances from North African giants as defending champions Pyramids of FC claimed a valuable 1-0 away win against Power Dynamos in Zambia, while Esperance de Tunis came from behind to earn a deserved 1-1 draw against Pedro de Luanda in Angola. Pyramids FC maintained their flawless beginning to the campaign, securing their second victory in as many matches to move joint top of Group A with Morocco's RS Berkane both sitting on 6 points. Power Dynamos, meanwhile, remain without a point after consecutive defeats to Berkane and Pyramids. In Group D, Esperance de Tunis showed character and determination, overturning a second-half deficit to earn a vital away point against Pedro de Luanda. The Angolan side opened the scoring in the 49th minute through Thiago Reis, putting the host in control. Sendeloi Lupopo hit back late to draw 1-1 with Al Hilal Omdurman in Lubumbashi on Sunday, a result that keeps Group C finally poised after 2 match days of the Total Energies CAF Champions League. The draw follows Friday's goalless meeting between MC Alger and Mamelodi Sundowns in Algiers. Sundowns lead Group C on goal difference with 4 points, level with Al Hilal. MC Alger sit third on 2 points, while Lupopo have won after 2 matches. Both teams resume continental duty in January, with Lupopo aiming to return improved second-half momentum into their first group win, and Al Hilal looking to maintain an unbeaten start. And Kaizer Chiefs co-coach Cedric Gazi expressed satisfaction with securing 1 point from their recent CAF Confederations Cup match against Zamalek, especially given challenging circumstances of the game. Speaking after the 1-1 draw on Saturday at the Peter Mokaba Stadium in the Limpopo province, Gazi noted that while his team had chances to win, a draw was a positive result considering the setbacks they faced early in the match.
If you look at how the game was, I'd say that it's a good point, but I'd say that we could have got more. But in football it's like that, and we happy for the points that we got, because as well it was tough conceding a goal in the first 2-3 minutes.
And netball running club Besta says he expected Kenyan star Margaret Jepchumba to claim the women's title at this year's Soweto Marathon. Jepchumba delivered storming home in 2 hours, 34.33 seconds to secure the $14,000 winner's check. Onalina Konkobe, tipped as the favorite, finished third.
Okay, I can tell you honestly, we believed in our men. Our money was on Alene and a host of other top Nedbank athletes, but my main aim was to win the ladies division in the Soweto Marathon today. That's why you didn't see me at the end. I was on course, seconding especially the ladies, make sure they get enough nutrition. Because in the past they were neglected and running out of energy. And I'm glad that it was planned. And after 3:11 city to city, I knew that Margaret was in shape.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Tabiso Lihuku has the latest business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Nhlanhla, and good afternoon. South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile says that delegates at the 58th SADC Parliamentary Forum must come up with the policies and programs to address the challenges brought by climate change. Mashatile made a virtual address to the event in Durban in the KwaZulu-Natal province. The meeting heard that 60% of the youth in the SADC region are impacted negatively by climate change.
Key actions include creating climate change strategy and action plan, mainstreaming climate change into other policies, enhancing climate information services, and focusing on water resources management to build regional resilience.
South Africa's grocery chain Pick n Pay says its chief financial officer, Lorena Olivier, will step down after the retailer's annual general meeting next year. This as the retailer battles mounting losses and fierce competition. The company has appointed Tina Rutledge, a former regional manager at EY Western Cape, to join in February 2026 and take over as CFO in August following a structured handover period. Pick n Pay working to cut losses and aims to break even by 2028 as it faces stiff competition from ShopRite and Woolworths. A Purchasing Managers Index survey has showed that a monthly gauge of South African manufacturing sentiment saw its sharpest drop of the year in November. The seasonally adjusted PMI, sponsored by South African bank Absa, fell to 42.0 in November from 49.2 in October. Absa said in a statement that the survey results underscored the fragility of South Africa's manufacturing sector, with the demand and production declines overshadowing modest employment gains and easing cost pressures. Oil and Gas Exploration has launched a major board reset and appointed independent non-executive director Roald Guter as the chairperson. Guter replaces Phuthuma Nhleko as the West Africa-focused oil producer looks to refinance its debt. The company also announced the immediate departure of 3 independent non-executive directors, shrinking the size of the board to 4 members and cutting the company's cost base. The group is seeking to refinance its capital structure amid mounting debt and delayed payments from Ghana's government. A Swiss billionaire, Alfred Gardner, has called for increased taxation on the wealthy following the rejection of a 50% inheritance tax proposal targeting fortunes over $62.2 million. Gunter, a co-founder of a private equity partners group, said increasing concentration of wealth was a global problem. He highlighted the need for action to prevent a further concentration of wealth among ultra-rich, warning that without it, billionaires like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg will only accumulate more wealth in the future. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 447. In Botswana, it's at 14 pula 14. Kenya, 128 shillings 73. And Zambia, 22 kwacha 86. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5 rubles 33, Russia 77 rubles 43, India 89 rupees 34, China 7 yuan 6, and in South Africa the dollar will cost you 17 rand 10 cents, 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Gold is trading at $4,250 and platinum $1,687 per ounce. Brand crude oil is at $63.48 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Thabiso Lohoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Thank you, Thabiso. South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile says South Africa's successful hosting of the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg marked a milestone for the African continent. Speaking to Channel Africa on Friday evening in Johannesburg, Mashatile reflected on the country's presidency of the Global Forum, emphasizing that from the onset, the goal was to deliver an African G20. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe has more.
For generations, Miami has been a haven for those fleeing communist tyranny in South Africa. I mean, if you take a look at what's going on in parts of South Africa, look at South Africa, what's going on. Look at South America, what's going on. You know, I'm not going to, we have a G20 meeting in South Africa. South Africa shouldn't even be in the Gs anymore because what's happened there is bad. I'm not going. I told them I'm not going. I'm not going to represent our country there. It shouldn't be there.
In the days leading up to the G20 Leaders Summit in South Africa, US President Donald Trump announced that he would skip the summit and would not represent the United States, declaring that Miami had historically been a sanctuary for people fleeing what he described as community tyranny in South Africa. As the G20 postmortem continues to take shape, South African Deputy President Paul Mashatile has offered his reflections on the country's successful hosting of the Leaders Summit in Johannesburg last week, an event notably held without the presence of the United States. Speaking in an exclusive interview with Channel Africa on Friday evening at the Vincent Chabalala fundraiser event in Johannesburg, Mashatile outlined South Africa's efforts to ensure the summit served the broader African continent, highlighting inclusive participation and continental representation at the highest level. Mashatile described the summit as a major success, even amid United States' decision to boycott the event.
Well, right from the beginning, when we took over as the G20 president from Brazil, the president then said to us, let's do this as an African G20. Let's make sure that it's not just for South Africa. Even though a lot of them African countries are not members of the G20, but we felt that this must benefit the continent. So as a result, a lot of them participated as observers most of the times, but during the Leaders Summit, we invited them as guests and they were allowed to make inputs. So it was a good thing. You know that the US boycotted and said they are not coming, but it was a great success.
Mashatile said the summit's success lay in its broad inclusivity, reaching beyond Africa to the wider global south, the Caribbean, Europe, the EU and BRICS partners. He noted that leaders addressed climate change, multilateral reform and global financial inequality, agreeing on the need for debt relief for low-income countries.
Beyond Africa, we extended invitations to the global south. So you had, countries from the Caribbean, from Europe, the EU itself was here, from the East, those who are our partners in BRICS. So we made it broader. And I think that says a lot about its success. It was an inclusive process where we emphasize solidarity, we emphasize equality, we emphasize sustainability, and we brought issues like climate change on the agenda, the issue of looking at multilateralism and how we can change the architecture and the ecosystem of the global financing instruments to ensure that we can bring low-income countries to benefit, because often they are burdened by debt. So it was agreed in the discussion, even in the declaration, that let's do a lot to ensure that there is debt relief for low-income countries.
Mashatile said South Africa remains committed to engaging the United States as it assumes the G20 presidency, stressing that the Johannesburg Declaration is a collective G20 position, not South Africa's alone, following US's recent announcement to exclude South Africa in Miami. He added that Washington will have to build on the already adopted declaration and expressed confidence that member countries will stand by the commitment made.
Well, we are part of the G20. The declaration has been adopted. So when we go to the US, because they have now taken over, it's their turn, they have to start on the basis of the declaration that is already adopted. We are determined to go and participate. So we'll continue to engage them, but this declaration adopted in Johannesburg is not the declaration of South Africa. It's a declaration of the G20. And I'm sure those countries will stand with us going forward.
Former Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas, appointed in July as South Africa's Special Envoy to the United States in an effort to repair strained relations, told Channel Africa that South Africa must remain guided by its values. He said the country's commitment to non-racialism, its progressive constitution, strong rule of law and deep financial markets should form the basis of how Pretoria engages Washington going forward.
Countries must focus on what they stand for. In South Africa, we still are a non-racial country. We are still a country that is opposed to racism. In many ways, South Africa is a very progressive country. We probably have the most progressive constitution in the country. We have the rule of law. We still have deep financial markets. And all of these are positive things that I think we should use in thinking about how we engage with the world.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Deogratus Bwire, wewe kama mkurugenzi wa shirika la kutetea haki za binadamu kutoka kule Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Maandamano yameendelea kwa siku ya pili. Nini kinaendelea?
Kwanza mimi ningependa tusiliweke kama wafuasi wa upinzani. Kwa sababu kiukweli mimi nilipata kidogo kushuhudia watu waliokuwa wanapita barabarani hawakuwa kwa namna yote ile wamebeba bendera ya chama chochote cha upinzani.
Umezungumzia swala zima vitu ambavyo havijakaa sawa vinapaswa kurekebishwa. Vitu hivyo ni nini?
Hivyo vitu ambavyo havijakaa sawa tayari nimeshavisema huko. Najua kumekuwepo na mtiririko wa matukio mengi sana. Watu ambao wanakuwa wanapinga masuala kadha wa kadha ambayo yanaonekana kufanywa na vyombo vya dola kwenye mitandao au hata pia nje, wamekuwa wakichukuliwa hatua.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
On today's Africa Update Ask, as we mark World AIDS Day, the World Health Organization has called for sustained political leadership, international cooperation and human rights-centered approaches to end AIDS by 2030. Do you think this will be possible? Share your thoughts on Channel Africa's social media platforms at Channel Africa 1 on X and Instagram, on Channel Africa on Facebook, or you can send us your comments and voice notes to our WhatsApp number +2 763 406 9126.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. This World AIDS Day, let's transform the AIDS response, one choice at a time. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Channel Africa, the African perspective, and it's the time of the day where we get to find out what is coming up shortly after this show. And to do that, we've got in studio our man Teboho. Welcome.
How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Fantastic. Where is my co-pilot, Mateko? I saw her here. She ran away, and I was very excited because we haven't seen her in over a week, but very glad to have her back. Here's what's coming up on the upside this afternoon. So we'll be getting into a conversation about drunk driving. It's festive season now. So the likelihood, and this is based on previous year statistics, is that drunk driving cases are skyrocketing during this time of the year. But there's an agency, an organization that is saying that what if we were to do daily and predictable testing so as to shift the South Africans' culture when it comes to drinking and driving? Perhaps if we test them more regularly, it will allow them to think twice the next time they drink and want to go behind the wheel. So we'll be getting into that conversation to debunk how that can be practically applied. And then we'll be not joined in studio, online by Habbo Studio, who have won Best Use of Natural Light at the World Architecture Festival 2025. I have no idea how this structure looks like, because for me, maximizing natural light, you'll either have made this house out of glasses or windows so that you can get the most natural light, or it's just a house that's sitting outside without any walls. I've seen those Airbnbs and lodges where there's just a bed in the middle of nowhere. That's one way of maximizing natural light. And then Impilo Collection Foundation has launched a landmark installation at the Constitution Hill to give voice to survivors and call for collective action against gender-based violence. It's called Empower Her. It features an installation of 8,849 bras for humanity at the Constitution Hill, each bra representing a life affected by gender-based violence. We'll find out more about this exhibition and all that and a lot more coming up on the upside.
A jam-packed show indeed. Looking forward to that. Thank you so much.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
The South Africa Telecommunications Networks and Applications Conference, CENTEC, is underway in Cape Town, Western Cape Province in South Africa. Over 400 key players in the information and communications, technology and telecom sectors across Southern Africa are discussing issues focusing on research and developments in areas such as wireless communications, next-generation technologies and artificial intelligence, amongst others. To discuss this further, we've got Shalina Bray, OpenServe Executive for Technology Development and Innovation. Charlene, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you so much for having me.
Maybe let's start talking about the conference itself. It's now in its 27th year. Just how significant is this conference for the ICT sector?
So SATNEC 2025 marks the conference's 28th year, and it comes at a pivotal moment for Africa's digital transformation. We're convening in Hermanus currently till the 3rd of December, under a theme that puts artificial intelligence, secure next-generation infrastructure, and sustainability at the center. Beyond keynotes and high-level panels, we are expanding real-world impact through the SATNAC Industry Solutions Challenge and the Innovation Exhibition that connects student solutions with industry partners and employers. So this is taking technology to the next level, how innovation can make an impact and take Africa to ascend.
And Charlene, what does a secure, sustainable and inclusive digital future for Africa realistically look like?
So when we talk secure and sustainable and digital, we're talking next generation network infrastructure that is sustainable in terms of using green and renewable energy and secure in terms of being resilient, in terms of security, cyber threats, cyber crime, also in terms of vandalism, theft, and network outages. So it's building resilient, secure networks to connect the digital continent for the future that can then create and enable our talent and skills to innovate and take our country, our continent forward.
And is South Africa prepared for wide-scale AI adoption in your view?
Artificial intelligence has been a hype and a trend. There's a lot of work that needs to go into it. First of all, the foundation is clean data. So that's one of the challenges that a lot of large organizations face because they're sitting with legacy systems. So we need to start with the digital transformation, cleaning the data, having that to then implement artificial intelligence on top of that, building our data lakes and using AI to drive efficiencies and innovation forward.
Let's talk about the rising cyber security risks that are threatening national and business resilience. What does this look like?
So as technology becomes more pervasive in our everyday lives, so do cyber threats and cyber crime. With artificial intelligence, although it brings a lot of innovation and efficiencies, it also brings with it the capability of more enhanced AI. It enables the hackers and brings in more crime as well. And it is, how do I put it? You can go full circle. AI can also be used to prevent the cyber crimes and cyber threats. So it's how it's used that we need to educate users on cyber awareness, not to fall prey to phishing attacks, malware, spam. Don't just click on links, how to identify those kind of threats that become pervasive with digital technologies. Yeah.
And just before I let you go, Shalene, what are some of the practical steps needed to take before 2030 to ensure all communities benefit from an inclusive digital future?
So some of the steps, one, there's a lot of collaboration between academia, industry, and equipment manufacturers. That collaboration will help take innovation to the next step to help us implement more efficiencies for the future that can move Africa forward. With that, we need government, we need policies, the right policies to enable innovation and technology. We need AI ethical policies so that when new applications are developed, it follows the AI ethical policies, that we have objective innovation that's built. So those are the foundations to build the future for tomorrow. And you need to have a secure, stable foundation so that AI is effective going forward.
We'll leave it there, Shalene. Thank you so much for taking your time and talking to us on Africa Update.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Shalene Abre, OpenServe Executive for Technology Development and Innovation. And that's how we wrap up today's show from myself and the rest of the team. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Nhlanhla Mahlangu, and it's been a pleasure standing in for Lulu Gaboo.